All right, hello everyone and welcome to the Innovation Cafe. Thank you for joining us for Deconstructing Employee Engagement featuring Ken Maier, Global Business Development and Alliances Consultant. I'm Jen Sayufi, our moderator for today's webinar. If at any time you have a question, please ask it using the chat or question function within GoToWebinar. You will also interact with our team via social media by tweeting to @Mindjet using the hashtag InnovationCafe. Following the presentation, we will have a 15-minute Q&A period, and we will answer your questions at that time. We will also be recording our webinar, which will be available to view on our website. With that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is Ken Maier. Ken benefits from 10 years experience in driving employee engagement initiatives through social innovation with leading companies in the consulting services, healthcare, consumer products and retail, and technology industries. Additionally, he has more than 25 years worth of knowledge in sales, marketing, and business development of information technology solutions for well-known global technology brands. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. It looks like we've had a pretty remarkable turnout. In fact, I understand over 330 people have registered. You know, it's interesting because the two words, employee engagement, we hear about them, we see it, we see lots of press. In fact, there are over, if you go to Google and type in the words employee engagement, there are over 15 million hits on just those two words alone, not including all the subsets of that. So over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to spend some time deconstructing it, trying to get a better understanding of, well, what is it really, what does it really mean, and how can we improve it? So having said that, let's go ahead and jump right in. You know, we look at it and we say that when you look at employee engagement, according to Gallup organization, there are three primary or main levels of employee engagement. The first level, engaged, is the one that we all love. These are the employees who are absolutely valuable to the company. They have a strong commitment and want to see the company grow. They're contributing ideas. These are the people where we have their hearts and their minds. But as we move across the spectrum, we then see a different type of employee. We see the disengaged employee. These are the ones who come in, they do their work, they don't necessarily put in any extra effort, and they don't put their best foot forward. They kind of just sail along, they're doing their job, 9 to 5, whatever it is. The third type is really what we call the actively disengaged employees. These are the kind of employees nobody wants. These are the guys who come in, they're dissatisfied, they're demonstrably unhappy, and they're not shy about vocalizing it in the office. So according to Gallup, these are the three primary levels of employee engagement. But employee engagement is just one of these words, kind of like the word innovation. If you ask 10 people what it means, you're probably going to get 12 or 15 different answers. So in order to kind of come up with a common denominating view, we looked at three of the leading analysts. The first one, Towers Perrin, defined employee engagement as the extent to which employees put discretionary effort into their work, right? And that's a key word in this whole discussion today. A second one from Gallup said the involvement with and emotional commitment to work. So now we've got emotional commitment, discretionary effort, and according to Aon Hewitt, it's that intellectual and emotional commitment to the organization. Well, the consolidated view of these analysts, really, or consensus, is that engagement, employee engagement, is that heightened emotional connection that employees feel for the organization. And it's all about getting that greater discretionary effort into how they work at the company and outside the company. Okay, so moving on, when we look at the state of employee engagement in 2014, there are two primary characteristics that stand out. According to McKinsey, today, 67% of employees are either actively disengaged or underengaged in their jobs. When you look at Forrester's research, they claim that 77% of companies' employees never use their corporate social network. Now, one of my favorite questions to ask people is, what do you believe the two most frequently used words are on most companies' corporate social network? Since I can't hear your responses, I'll just give the answer. The two most frequently used words on most corporate social networks are happy birthday. So having said that, we're going to jump into a little bit of a video that we'd like to share with you, and it's called Who's Sinking Your Boat? And if you'll give me a moment, I'll get this teed up. Okay, we're going to get back to the presentation. So going back, kind of pick up where we left off, so you kind of begin to see the impact of employees that are engaged versus employees that are either underengaged or actively disengaged. So as we move on, we take a little look at the myths of employee engagement, and the first one is that cash is king. Well, salary and raises are important, yet it's really recognition that people get motivated by. The second big myth is reward program ROI doesn't exist, when in fact the facts actually point out that it can increase revenues by as much as 23%. The third myth is that high performers don't need to be engaged. Well, of course, the reality is taking them for granted can be very dangerous. And the fourth myth is that managers know how to engage employees, and that's not always the case. It truly does succeed or fail at the manager level. The fifth myth, as we see more and more millennials coming into the market and into the workplace, is that they're disinterested, they're not engaged. When the fact is they expect this type of capabilities and they actually get the most benefit from the recognition associated with employee engagement. So moving on, we're going to begin the next portion here with our first poll. And our first question is, how does your company currently engage its employees? And as soon as Jennifer runs it, we'll share the results with you. So Jennifer, over to you.
Yep, so we have the poll up right now. We're going to give everybody a couple of seconds to type in their responses, and then I'll share the results. So it looks like about 40% have voted so far, and the number is climbing. So just a couple more seconds, and hopefully everyone will be logged in. All right, we're at 80% right now, just a couple more votes. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. So the results look like 23% have no formal program in place, 54% have an annual employee survey, 6% have quarterly employee survey, and 17% have a collaboration platform.
Wow, fascinating results, Jen. So 23% have no formal program, 54%, more than half, do an annual employee survey, 6% do a quarterly survey, and only 17% have any platform for employee collaboration. Very interesting results. Okay, let's move on a little bit and over to the next topic is, let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of employee engagement. What are the things that are going on in how we work each day that affect how engaged we are or perhaps we're not? So it really has to start with, how do we spend our time at work? According to officetime.net, if you look at the numbers, 33% of us spend 1 to 2 hours a day on doing our email, and 22% of us spend more than 2 hours a day just doing email. When we look at the next metric, things like surfing the web, and it doesn't segregate the time we spend on personal versus business, but however, 27% of us spend 1 to 2 hours a day surfing the web, and 73% of us spend more than 2 hours a day on the web. The third interesting metric is the amount of time we spend in meetings. Only 18% of us spend 1 to 2 hours a day in meetings, and 70% of us spend more than 2 hours a day in meetings. When you really begin to look at this at the low end and at the high end, we're spending more than as much as 50 to 60% of our time in what would be described as non-role specific tasks. So it's just very interesting to see how we spend our time at work. Moving on, one of the most interesting things in the dynamics of employee engagement is understanding some more of the characteristics. So when we begin to look at the difference between employee engagement, hygiene, and satisfaction, when we look at employee hygiene, this is defined as the basics every employee would expect at any company they join. They would expect to get their salary. They would expect a reasonable benefits package, a clean and mildly, if not overwhelmingly productive workspace, and some degree of job security. Those are the basics. They call that employee hygiene. It's now when we start to move to satisfaction, when we start to see where employees begin to feel like they're part of a team, they're valued, they are recognized, and in this particular category, we've got the employees' minds. They're committed, they're doing their work, but not necessarily their hearts. It isn't until we get to that third dimension of engagement where we really start to see that they love the work they're doing, it's challenging, there's a lot of recognition for the contributions they make, they recognize that there are opportunities for personal growth, and it's in this category that we've got the employees' minds and we have their hearts. This is where we find that discretionary and emotional level of effort. So moving on, We then look at what are the impacts on business when employees are disengaged versus when they're engaged. When they're disengaged, there's a 32% negative impact on operating income. Only 17% of the employees say that they even know how to meet their customers' needs. Only 13% ever recommend their products or their company's products to friends or other people, and only 3%, the very smallest amount, ever actively advocate or promote for their companies. Very, very small and negative results compared to the impact when employees are engaged. When employees are engaged, there's a positive 19% impact on operating income. 70% say they know and feel comfortable in how to meet their customers' needs. 78% will recommend their products to other people. And 67%, which is disproportionately high, actually advocate for their companies. So it's very easy to see the difference in the behavior of employees who are disengaged versus those who are engaged. So as we move on, we begin to look, according to Accenture, some of the top reasons that people leave your companies and the impact. The number one reason, 31% of employees leave because they either don't like or don't feel comfortable with their immediate supervisor or boss. When you look, the number two reason, 31% are looking for greater responsibility, more challenge, and to have more influence and choices in their careers and in their roles. The third element, 35% believe, only 35% believe that their organizational leadership in companies were good or effective in managing their career and their advancement. The other 70 or 65% felt that they weren't or didn't have that pathway to advancement. And the fourth reason is that 43% in the survey Accenture did of the middle managers felt that they were doing the majority of the heavy lifting and were not being recognized for their effort. This all comes down to one result, that when you look at the true cost, and there's probably other metrics, but the cost of employee turnover can be as much as 61% of their annual salary. And you begin to multiply that number by the annual turnover, and it's pretty significant. Okay, so what makes this kind of interesting, and again within the dynamics of employee engagement, is there are new values, a changing workplace. A lot of things have changed. When I entered the workplace in the past, I mean, the rules were different. It was a 9-to-5 work in the office environment. There were perpetual silos of information, silos of innovation. Everything happened in the enterprise heterogeneously. And consistent with the survey, 54% of our polls said they do an annual survey. The annual employee survey was how people used to tap in and find out what the employees were thinking. Well, when we move to today, from that static environment to a more dynamic environment, we're working in a completely new economy. The information economy, the economics of work have changed radically. Information is available everywhere and anywhere. We begin to look at employees with mobile access who now work from home. They work on evenings, they work on weekends. That whole 9-to-5 view of how we work is gone, and we're beginning to see the emergence of purpose-driven social collaboration in the enterprise, ways of engaging people not only directly with their work, but with the people that they work with. As we begin to take a little bit of a view to tomorrow in the future, it's really about this whole concept of social business engagement. It's that transformative, connected, adaptive way of engaging employees, not only with the direct work that they do, but with all the people across all the various departments of the organization. That is what propels that next level of employee engagement. So we thought it would be worthwhile to share probably what I see as one of the most interesting examples of changing the game in human resources. So we all know Netflix, but this is a brief summary of how they completely reinvented HR. So number one was their concept of vacation policy. With all this new mobile technology and work from home and work anywhere you are, they said, look, we don't have a 9-to-5 work policy. Why should we have a vacation policy? Their view is if you've done your work, your project is complete, take the vacation time that you need. In fact, they actually encourage their senior leadership to proactively take vacations and share the information with employees. That's a radical different approach. The second big theme is their expense policy. It's actually so simple and it makes such sense. Their basic view is act in our best interest at Netflix. If it's money you wouldn't spend for yourself, then don't spend it for Netflix. They have a very liberal policy and in fact have been able to prove that their expense structure is substantially lower than most other companies. The third big theme was this notion that it's context versus control. They train their managers not to be micromanagers and oversight supervisors, but to constantly help the manager's employees with better context and insight as opposed to putting or exerting more control. And the final big theme, and there's plenty more and we can share the report, is that Netflix pays top of the market. They absolutely acknowledge and recognize that in the long run, it's substantially more cost effective to retain the best people with higher salaries and better bonus structures than it is to constantly have that annual turnover. So as I said, we have the complete Netflix report, and if you're interested in the report, please send an information to Jennifer, and we're happy to send you the details of the report. Okay, normally I'd say are there any comments and questions, but we'll save that for the end. So moving on, let's go to our next poll. And Jen, if you're ready, the topic or the poll question is, what are your organization's barriers to employee engagement? And we're actually going to compare the results of this poll to the survey that MIT Sloan Institute did. So Jen, over to you.
All right, so I have the poll up right now, and it looks like people have already started to vote. So the options are lack of strategy, competing priorities, business case, management understanding, and knowledge sharing environment. So please submit your answers and then we will be sharing the results. It looks like about 50% right now have voted and that number is still climbing, so we'll give everybody a couple more seconds to just log in their answers and then we'll share the results. Okay, I'm going to close the poll right now because it looks like all of you have answered. And let's share the results. It looks like 33% say lack of strategy, 51% said competing priorities, 9% said business case, 44% said management understanding, and 32% said knowledge sharing environment.
Fascinating results, Jennifer. So let me make sure I got that right. 33% said lack of strategy. 51%?
Yep, 51% said competing priorities.
9% said 9% said what?
Business case.
Business case, thank you. 44% said what?
Management understanding.
Got it. And then 32% knowledge sharing.
Yes.
Outstanding. So let's compare the results that we got from our poll with the poll results that we got from MIT Sloan. So when we look at their results, lack of strategy was 28%, and let's compare that result. 28% compared to 33% in our poll. Competing priorities, their poll said 26%, our poll said 51%. Business case, which is really interesting, they said was 21%, and of course our poll results were 9%. Management understanding was only 20%, ours was 44%, and 16% for knowledge sharing versus us at 32%, which says there was a remarkably high difference in the results from our poll and the results that MIT Sloan got. Very interesting. Okay, so moving on from here, we want to share a story. Everybody loves to hear a story, so we kind of have two different stories, and we call it a tale of two engagements. The first one is one of the largest and most high-profile technology companies, and what they wanted to do was, their biggest problem was that they had employees who'd been with them for 10 years, 15, 20, and some even 25 years. And they, like most other companies, had their typical reward program. You know, the 5-year anniversary, you got this plaque. On your 10-year anniversary, you got this type of reward. What they did was fascinating. They wanted to come up with a way of identifying two different dimensions of behavior in their companies. The question they wanted to ask, the two questions, and they did two separate challenges to their employees. What kind of reward for your anniversary would you want that's personal and meaningful to you? So they asked one half of their employees, what would you want to get that's personal and meaningful to you? They ran a double-blind challenge with the concept, and they asked a different half of their employees, what would you suggest giving? What kind of personal, meaningful reward for your anniversary would you suggest giving to employees? We can't share the results, but it's a great example of companies using an engagement strategy to get insight not only to what people wanted, but to what they give in order to get some insight to how people behave in the organization. The second story is really my favorite, and this is the story of two of the world's largest retailers, and they're actually the same company, but we call the story, Who's the Hero? And we're going to actually ask that, but unfortunately we have to give the answer at the end on who's the hero. The first one is Walmart. Walmart, as you know, is an enormous retail organization, hundreds of thousands of employees all over the world and the country. They wanted to run a challenge to identify ways to improve costs at the store level. So they engaged with Mindjet, Spigot, Engage a couple of years ago. They ran a challenge and they invited all the employees to put their ideas in. Now, on the one hand, we engaged those employees, but what was fascinating is the winning idea, the top idea out of a company of hundreds of thousands, was there was a janitor in one of the stores whose only job is to clean the break rooms. And he realized that every time he walked into the break room, the lights would automatically come on, and every time he walked out, the lights would automatically go off. And in each of these break rooms are a half dozen or so vending machines. His simple idea was, what if we turned off the lights in the vending machines since the lights are on in the room? They implemented that idea, and that year they had $1.8 million in energy savings. Now, put that story on the side for a moment. We're going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, and this is the Sam's Club story. Sam's Club, this was a couple of years ago, wanted to run a challenge to all their branch store managers and assistant store managers, and the theme was, what can we do that will improve our revenues during this particular Christmas season? They got everybody involved, thousands of new ideas and participation. There was one store manager in an economically depressed area, and he said, look, he goes, in my geography, we're economically depressed, whatever. He said, my people in my region don't have $35, which is the fee to join Sam's Club, and where they make the majority of their margin. He goes, that's money they're going to spend on gifts for their children, their mothers, their fathers, their husbands. They don't have that kind of money. So he said, what if we offered a 10-day membership for $10? Now, initially, the finance people were crazy. You can't do that. That's the sacred cow. But when they looked at the math, $35 for 365 days is about 10 cents a day compared to $1 a day. That idea got implemented, and increased revenue that Christmas season for Sam's Club by almost $100 million. So the question that I like to ask when I tell these stories, and I wish I could hear a bunch of answers, is really simple. Who's the hero? Now, some people say the janitor, some people say the store manager. We'd like to believe that the real hero in the story was the management team that said, let's listen to what our employees have to say and let's engage them for their ideas. Okay, so moving on, a little bit about Mindjet and Spigot Engage, just to give you some insight to who we are. So for those of you who don't know, Mindjet is the global leader in driving employee productivity through the visualization and collaboration of information and ideas in an extremely intuitive manner. For those of you who don't know Spigot, Spigot is the leading provider of collaborative innovation solutions that drive measurable outcome and results by engaging and providing that engagement and recognition to employee contribution. Together in 2013, we merged and now have become Mindjet Spigot Engage, and our whole mission is to deliver this next dimension of employee engagement through collaborative innovation. So when we understand or we take a look, well, what is collaborative innovation? Some of the key things that stand out about Mindjet Spigot Engage, just to tease you all a little, is it's all about purpose-driven engagement. At the beginning of the session, we said that 77% of employees never use their corporate social network, and the two most frequently used words are happy birthday. That's because they're not purpose-driven. And according to our poll, only 17% of the people who responded to the poll have a collaboration platform. What makes a collaboration platform really work and engage employees is when it's purpose-driven. The second thing is the ability to provide employee recognition, not on an individual basis, but recognition in a way that everybody else sees what they've contributed and their accomplishments. And recognizing employees has to be visible. The third piece is not only recognizing them, but allowing them to establish reputation. When we look at Mindjet Spigot Engage clients, a very large majority of them, when we ask them their reasons for using our solutions, the most frequent answer was to increase employee engagement. So that's a little bit about us, and now we're going to shift over. We'd love to share more with you, and there's a lot of ways to find out. So if you want to learn more in short order, please contact us. You'll find us to be very responsive. We are going to be sponsoring future webinars on this same theme. In fact, either late August or early September, we're going to do a session called Constructing Employee Engagement. Or if you'd like, we're happy to arrange a briefing for your team and your other peers in your organization. So at this stage, I'm going to turn it back and just ask if we have any questions and open it up a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Ken. I am just going to give everybody a couple minutes to place their questions using the chat or question function in GoToWebinar. In the meantime, I just want to remind everybody that the session is recorded and it will be posted on our website shortly, so you can keep an eye out for that. And we will be promoting other future webinars on that same page. So with that, it looks like I have a couple questions coming in, and I'm going to start off with Ken. Are there any ways to measure our current level of employee engagement?
That's actually a great question. I've been asked that several times, Jen. I mean, the conventional approach is most people say, well, let's look at using our survey, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Using a survey to measure employee engagement, your immediate reaction would be, well, that's my level of engagement. One of the things that, if you look at some of the features or capabilities of some of the collaboration platforms, some of the things we shared, like that recognition and that reputation measurement, there are tools that will tell you how engaged are my employees and how willing are they to contribute. So the answer is yes, there's a couple of ways to do it. Personally, I don't believe that surveys are the right answer.
Okay, thanks. I guess that leads into the next question, which was how well suited for employee engagement are quarterly and annual surveys?
Oh, that was like a perfectly segued combination of questions. Interesting that when we look, 54% of the people who responded do annual surveys. The problem that I always struggled with and the organizations I've worked with struggle with is they tend to be linear in nature. It's hard to engage employees on what they're really thinking other than getting some quantitative answers. Yes, no, a lot, a little. You're not really getting insight. You're not tapping into any of their cognitive surplus or intelligence. So my view of it is that surveys, whether they're quarterly or annually, have a role, but if you're really looking at ways to engage your employees, there are better answers.
Awesome. So the next question is, what are the most effective methods of increasing employee engagement?
Well, it's interesting that question as well. I think when we went back and looked at the presentation, one of the key myths, the first one, in fact, was that cash is king, reward, salary and bonuses drive behavior. When you look at all the analysis across the leading firms like Aon, Hewitt, Towers, Perrin, it's actually recognition for contribution that's the number one way to get employees engaged.
Okay, thank you. So the next question we have is, it takes more than just making a collaboration platform available. It also requires behavior change. Would you recommend a full-up change management effort along with the platform?
The answer is kind of maybe, and I'm only ambiguous in my response because there's a natural reflexive resistance to change. The real strategy approach is to build out a strategy and infrastructure to support it. There's so many things that can derail that need to be thought of, asked and answered in advance. So there is a minor degree of change management, but it's not overwhelming.
Great. So the next question is, can our existing social platforms be used to increase employee engagement?
That's a loaded question, Jen. My response to that would be to say potentially. The challenge that I've seen in the majority of generic social platforms, and I can name a few of them, but for purposes of political correctiveness, I won't. A lot of customization has to be done on those platforms. They tend to be generic in nature out of the box, and there's very little purpose-driven capabilities that are out of the box. So the answer is probably yes, but there's a balance of how much customization and resources required to deliver it and then ultimately operate it.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, from your Sam's Club and Walmart example, is it equally important to recognize the employees and their ideas as well as the managers who are willing to implement the ideas?
Oh, I couldn't come up with a stronger yes response. I mean, the operative words in a true proactive employee engagement is the democratization of employee engagement. We have a saying that I've used for years saying nobody knows as much as everybody. And the Sam's Club Walmart story are really designed to illuminate that anybody from a janitor to a store manager to a CEO can have great ideas. And it's that democratization of that process that makes people feel motivated to participate and engage. Nobody wants to not be heard or their ideas or input seen just because they're a janitor. Great question.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for answering that one. The next question is it more important to focus on the structural behavioral changes first or the technology first when working to increase employee engagement?
Yeah, and that's a question that there's never a 100% answer, but I've always believed that it's important to understand the capabilities and what the technology can enable. It's kind of like a file system, right? If you didn't know about using My Documents on your computer, you would always go to your file system to put all your files in the folders, alphabetically. The technology can enable a completely different strategy and infrastructure. So it's definitely a combination of both, but it's a chicken and egg. Which comes first? If you don't know about and aren't aware of the capabilities, how can you drive the right strategy?
Got it. Thanks, Ken. Our next question, and we've received a ton of questions, so I apologize if we don't get to your question today. We will be following up in some form or another, so we'll definitely get back to you. So the next question is, how do we motivate managers to adapt and initiate more risk-taking with employee engagement given the challenge of generational differences in the workplace?
It's a great question, too. This is amazing. I'd love to say that I've never been asked that question, and there is going to be behavioral response differences by generation. Millennials are naturally more inclined to embrace social engagement, collaboration, and I think getting the middle managers to embrace it is kind of a byproduct of doing it. Having them engage, most have never been in a position where they've been asked at a highly visible level for their input. A number of companies run CEO-driven challenges, and the middle managers are every bit as active in the response and participation as their subordinate employees.
Great. Okay, and then our last question for this session is, I am an internal consultant with a large pharmaceutical company. We are in the process of implementing an employee engagement and innovation management system. We have found that our biggest challenges have come on two fronts: creating a platform and creating a culture of innovation. Creating a culture of innovation has proven to be the more intricate of the two challenges. In your experience, what can be done to create a culture of innovation?
Wow, this is a topic I'd love to get into because it's a bit longer. I really believe that the foundation of any significant and well-built employee engagement innovation has to be creating that culture of innovation, and that comes back to defining the strategy and getting the commitment from the top down and to a degree from the bottom up. And it really is about creating all of the ingredients. Whoever asked that question, we'd be happy to share just our insight, having worked with not only pharmaceuticals, but across a number of industries on some of the building blocks associated with creating a repeatable, predictable culture of innovation. That's a very broad, deep question, and I love it.
All right, thanks, Ken. So I just want to repeat again that we will be following up with everyone. So if your question did not get answered today, we will follow up with you. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this week's Innovation Cafe, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.